Good morning, everyone. This is Carl Polachuk from Small Biz Thoughts, and I want to thank everybody for showing up today for a brand new webinar series. One of the things that I'm always trying to do here is find new, fun, interesting things to do and different perspectives on how things work in the world. In terms of just some housekeeping, Harry is he's having electrical problems at his house, so he's scooting off to his office. And so he'll be there in just a few minutes, and he'll be joining us live at that time. I would like to encourage you all to use the questions window to ask any questions that you might have, and I'll be happy to answer anything there. First question is a perfect question, and we're going to get right into that, and that is the webinar link good for the series? And the answer is yes. So we've got these scheduled all year, and we're only going to do one a month, and this is not something where people are going to be able to pay to be my guest or any of that kind of stuff. I'm going to pick the guests that I think are useful and interesting to the SMB community, and so some of them might have paid me for some other advertising, but they're not going to be able to get on this show by paying me money. So anyway, that's where we are. So the one link gives you all of the reminders for the entire year. So as long as you don't remove yourself from that list, you should be good. So there will be a site specifically for who's the next guest and that sort of thing, and it's at smallbizthoughts.com/events/global. So you're certainly welcome to wander over there and look around. We will also be putting the recorded webinars, we will link to them from that. So if you like something and you want to share it with somebody, that will be the place where you can send somebody to that link. You know, our basic idea is that the world has become pretty darn flat in the last 10 years. I'm coming up with about the 10th anniversary of many, many things now. We just did our 10th SMB pre-day show. And, you know, from the days of the early SBS and all of that, the world has changed quite significantly. We are hopefully coming out of this recession. It looks like we are. It looks like the recession is coming to an end in the United States. It's still a little tough in several countries. And so, you know, what's interesting is that more and more these other countries and their economies are affecting us. The biggest initial public offering in the last year, 2014, was Alibaba. And if you haven't actually looked into it, I highly encourage you to look into Alibaba and see what they're up to. They are the place you go if you want to have something created. So, for example, many of you know Ken Edwards. Ken Edwards finds products that people want and are interested in, and then he says, oh, well, why don't I make a custom version of that product that nobody else can sell, and then I'll put it up on eBay and on Amazon, and I'll have them custom built. Well, how do you get that done? Well, it turns out you go to Alibaba and you say, I need somebody who custom builds this product, and you find a manufacturer and you send them your design, and lo and behold, back comes whatever, a gross of these products. So Alibaba does that. They also do all kinds of manufacturing, and they are a great marketplace where people talk to each other. And in some ways they're almost an analogy to what is happening worldwide, that the world, you know, they say the world's becoming flat. And in truth, the world has always been really, really well connected. And I think we just went through this period. For those of you who are in your 40s and 50s and 60s, we grew up at a time when the United States was sort of withdrawing from the rest of the world. In the post-World War II era, we were so focused on ourselves that we forgot that people used to travel the world extensively. And we kind of got away from that, and now I think we're coming back to it. If you read the history of someone like Edison or Ford, you'll find that even though we think of them as like American companies. They have huge holdings in other countries and always have. Thomas Edison went back and forth across the Atlantic Ocean many, many times to build up a business in Europe at the same time it was being built in the United States. And who was his biggest competition in Europe? A guy named Westinghouse, his biggest competition here in the United States. So those sort of things used to be very common, and we kind of forgot about it, I think. So one of the things that's happened recently is the evolution of many third world countries, formerly third world countries, are becoming quite active and quite successful at manufacturing, services, and so forth. Many of you are very familiar with what was Zenith Infotech, became Continuum. That entire organization is built on the understanding that there are a lot of really well-educated, incredibly smart people in India that just simply happen to cost less than a lot of the equivalent talent in the United States. So they decided to create outsourcing services to help companies like yours and mine do a better job at what we do. And there are many, many other examples of that. I currently am using the RMM agents and the service desk from Max Focus, which used to be GFI. They're located in Scotland. So, you know, I'm buying my services and software from another country. And many of you are as well. So, you know, it's just sort of interesting that as our economy evolves, we can become more and more connected with the rest of the world. And so this entire webinar series is designed to spend a year focusing on what that means to us in the small business space. What does it mean to us that people are becoming more and more globally connected? What does it mean that the world is becoming flatter? And how can we use that to our advantage? Because you also have to remember the same thing is happening to your clients. Their world is getting smaller. Their world is getting more connected. Their world is becoming more competitive based on people who are setting up services in other countries. So more and more we have to pay attention to this and say, okay, let's look at what Tocqueville said about the United States of America. Democracy is coming, he told his French readers. Democracy is coming and there's nothing we can do about it. We can't stop it, but we can affect what it looks like when it gets here. Now, whether or not they were very effective on actually doing that is a different question, but that was his advice. And Tocqueville is widely read as a political philosopher because of his understanding of how democracy worked in the United States and how it might be molded as it is adopted in other countries in Europe. So think about that for us. If we know what the global economy looks like for the rest of the world, what can we do to help affect what it looks like as it comes to us? You know, a lot of people wrung their hands and were, you know, freaked out basically when cloud services became something that they didn't have any choice, they couldn't ignore anymore. And then when they looked around, they realized, well, wait a minute, I'm selling hosted BDRs, I'm selling hosted spam filtering, I'm selling hosted exchange, I'm selling Adobe subscriptions to software, so what difference does it make? I'm already selling cloud services, I just need to call them that. So I think a lot of people stopped freaking out and decided it was time to just focus on making money. And it's the same thing with the globalization of SMB. We will have more and more products that are able to take advantage of intergalactic, worldwide systems. And as that happens, one of the things we have to do is figure out, okay, so what does this mean to the lawyer in Sacramento? What does this mean to the dentist in Seattle? What does this mean to my client who lives in New York City? And, you know, with luck, what we're going to do is together explore some of the ways that we can look at the world a little bit differently than people have looked at it before. You know, we have the opportunity now to basically create the next version of SMB. You know, what does it look like? Maybe it's not a big server. Maybe you don't need a ProLiant server in the client's office, but you need a little bitty box that just does Active Directory. If that's the case, let's make that happen. And maybe it makes sense to store that data somewhere else. We've already seen discussions with regard to HIPAA and finances and other things that a lot of countries are reluctant to have their data cross international boundaries. In Australia, certain kinds of data must live inside the national boundaries of Australia. In Canada, certain information has to exist inside the boundaries of Canada. And I did a webinar recently on, or a podcast on the SMB Community Podcast with Rob Ray from Datto, and he was talking about how after this big fiasco with the NSA, there's a lot of countries where people say, I will put my data anywhere except the United States because we don't want it to be touched by the security agencies of the United States. The funny thing about that is that some of them are actually choosing to put their data in Russia or other countries where I guarantee somebody's looking at all of that data, right? They just haven't been on the national or the international news talking about looking at everybody's data. But it's something that you and I have to deal with. We literally, 10 years ago, I never gave any thought to my client's data crossing an international boundary. And now it's going to be a part of my job going forward. So it's just one of those things that you have to think about, like, what other things do we add to our list of resources, list of things that we need to be paying attention to as we go forward. And I believe Mr. Harry Brelsford has joined us. Have you got a microphone there, Harry? He will be with us in just a second. So in the meantime, part of what I wanted to do as we kick off this series is I wanted to have Harry Brelsford as my first guest because he literally was one of the first people to be in SMB and to look at a global perspective. I think it was 2006. It could have been 2005. But he did the Spring SMB Nation Conference in Europe, right? We did it in Amsterdam, and he had people there from literally all over the globe, not just Europe, not just the UK, but Amsterdam and Europe, and people from the Middle East and Africa and Australia. So, you know, he was able to bring together a huge crowd there. And Harry, I remember Harry contacting me from India and saying, can you sell your books for, I think it was $1.50. I'm like, I don't think I can because it cost me more than that to create them. So,
hello.
Hello. So, welcome. I'm glad you got electricity at your office at least.
Yeah, exactly, folks. We're taking a little winter storm up here, but yeah, I recognize that. Who is that debonair, handsome individual up on the screen?
So you're the first globe-trotting member of the small and medium business community.
Yep.
And you know, I want to, I guess, partly honor you for that, for bringing this to us, for connecting us with people in other countries, and you know, it's not slowing down. This year, the year that's just ending, you hit 30 countries. Is that right? Am I off by a factor there?
Yeah, my team did. I think I was down around 22.
Okay.
But to be honest, the project was 30 countries. So, but both people are telling the truth.
Well, you know, I think that you're the only person on this call who's been to 22 countries this year. I could be wrong about that. Maybe somebody will raise their hand, but
yeah. Well, there's a Facebook app for that. You can mark all the countries you've ever been.
Exactly.
You've seen the one for the 50 states, right?
Right. So let me ask you. Let's go back 10, 12 years, whatever it was. What made you decide to lift your head across the border and go beyond, you know, just the UK and Australia as places to go visit?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I suppose both DNA and culture. I mean, so on the DNA side, I'm the youngest of 5 kids, and I'm going to say every one of us has made international trade a hallmark, for our careers. So for example, my brother's coming up on his, I think it must be his 5th year in Egypt, having served Microsoft as a lawyer out there, and now he's in a different role. But he married a Korean, so he did his internships in law school in Seoul, South Korea, in their Olympics. And my other brother made his career as the general counsel for SanDisk, and so he...
Your mic is a little light all of a sudden.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Much better.
Hang on. Let me turn it up. There we go. No, but you get I can go on and on and on. My sister in Afghanistan and
wow.
So it's just been kind of the way we were raised. I lived in Australia for a year at 16 as an exchange student, and Carl, I guess I just felt that we should probably pay attention to the other 97% of the world's population. I mean, I know we're number one in the U.S. We're we're number one, the Seattle Seahawks. I got it.
Exactly.
But it's a big market out there. So with that said, so that's kind of the DNA, and then maybe the culture was just the recognition that it's there's huge opportunities overseas, and you just got to grab it. And Carl, you need to grab it when these windows open. Like 12 years ago, like this last year, you really need to jump on it, because these windows can close, because of diplomatic relations or
right.
The economy, right?
Yeah. We took a 5-year hiatus there.
Yeah. So Jenny traveled to Europe and to South Africa with me on this tour, and I told her, seize the day, because you just never know when that window will close,
Right. Well, so when you think about the travels that you did starting 12 years ago, did you have a specific goal in mind? Like you were going to go sell books, you were going to go get people to sign up for SMB Nation, or were you just trying to see what's going on out there?
No, it's definitely goal driven. I mean, we were sponsored in that era by Microsoft and HP and a few others. I think Trend Micro was a sponsor for part of that, telling the small business server story. And then I happened to have the books, and the books were, let's just say it contributed to my compensation. It certainly wasn't the only compensation. As you know, books are a labor of love.
Yeah, it takes a lot of $40 books to pay for a trip around the world.
Yeah, exactly. And as you alluded to when I called in, the currency mismatch. We do pretty well in the UK, but we struggle to sell books in India and South Africa, where the currency differential is just so dramatic.
Right.
And if you will, the dollar is strong in those countries. So. No, it was definitely purpose-driven. So the first round of tours was Small Business Server. The second was the Exam Cram.
Right. Beatrice
was in on some of that. And as you'll recall, she's bilingual, so she was able to knock out Europe and so on. So I suffered like you down in Australia and New Zealand. So Beatrice, you own Finland.
Well, I did the Prague show for that.
Yeah, that's right.
And
you were part of that motion.
I was quite surprised, because I did my material in the morning, and they had a translator, and so everybody who spoke Czech could get it translated. And then we went to lunch, and we came back from lunch, and I asked if we should wait for the translator, and the woman there in charge of the Microsoft office said, "Oh no, there's no translation in the afternoon." They had to take the 70-282 exam in English, and so they had to take the class in English. And I thought, man, that's a serious challenge, to take, because that was kind of a reading exam. It was a story-based exam.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe to finish one thought is also at some level I'm kind of setting up my career internationally also as an example for my kids. My oldest son's interested in engineering and studying that in college. And Carl, I just think in his career, the bigger opportunities are going to be overseas, if that's what he wants.
Right.
But you know, they can't build airport infrastructure fast enough out in Dubai and Goa and some of those places. It'll be up to him to decide where he wants his career to be, but I've told him, I believe your career will be very different than mine.
Well, that's true, and he's at San Luis Obispo, right?
Yeah, he is, and loves it. Good weather, let me tell you.
Well, better than your weather.
So that's kind of what brought it on, you know, is just setting an example. It's in my DNA, and then, you know, some both cultural and commercial aspects, if that all kind of makes sense. And by the way, it is kind of fun. I mean, you know that.
Right.
It is. Number 5, distant number 5 is, it's fun.
Right, exactly. So yeah, bullet point, it's fun to travel overseas. And, you know, it's also interesting because you always hear about all these miscellaneous cultural differences. Even in the UK, Australia, New Zealand, things are different. But when you get to India and China, it's very different. And, you know, part of it is they're becoming more like us, and part of it is we're becoming more open to them.
Yeah. It was very interesting to, not to get political, but we do live in a geopolitical world. But I definitely had my challenges in the mid-'90s as an American. Carl, it was tough. Our foreign policy was a little bit rough around the edges.
Yeah.
And then that has changed dramatically with this most recent tour. And again, I'm just reporting. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, or, you know, I'm just reporting. But the reception has certainly been more friendly this last tour than it was in the mid-'90s. I always started every speech in the mid-'90s with I apologize 3 times. You know, I'm an obese American male. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me.
And then you start talking about Microsoft licensing, and you have to apologize again. So.
Yeah.
So,
Although, you know, you hit on an interesting topic. Microsoft actually has more positive brand affinity overseas than some pockets of the U.S. You know how now Seattle certainly is a Microsoft town,
right.
But sir, you're down in the Bay Area, and that's a tough sled for Microsoft.
Well, Microsoft doesn't have quite the monopoly here, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Well, even Sacramento, you know, we have the manufacturing for Apple, and a lot of their tech support is here. So.
Yeah, and it's just been really interesting how overseas. I'll give you a Polaroid snapshot, but I was in a bike race or tour. It really is a bike tour at my age down in Cape Town on one of my trips, and had a Microsoft jersey on. My wife had a Microsoft jersey on, and people were cheering and saying Microsoft as we rode by, and I'm like, what? What's this? But in India and other countries, they like Microsoft. I mean, and think about it. It's created technology, opportunities, jobs. You know,
right.
It all adds up, but it's great. It's like I could live here.
Well, and you've always
What's
been.
this? You like me?
You've always focused on education, and you've always been a little more financial oriented. Do you think that with the international perspective that you've become more aware of, like, the difference in finances as you travel?
Well, there's an app for that. I mean, the currency converter.
Right, but I mean, like, for example, you know, what does it mean to be middle class in India 10 years ago versus today? It's a dramatic difference. There's still, you know, wages are much lower than ours, but, you know, it's changing.
Oh, yeah. No, it's changing very quickly. And again, that's why I'd encourage people on the phone, if not yourself, for darn sure, make sure your kids do a high school or a college year overseas. And Carl, I would offer, you know, probably watch your viewership go down at this point, but I'd offer it's not Paris. I get the Paris thing. You know, my wife, you know, we can go to the museums and my boys and meet a nice girl. And no, I was thinking more Shanghai.
Right. Well,
But
and that's a part of the world getting flatter is when you look at, I mean, right now I think about it'd be great to go to the Philippines and to Japan and China because those are the next markets where we need to be, right? And they need to know like what is managed services and how do we deliver it, and at the same time managed services evolves as we take it from one place to another. It can't be the same anywhere. It can't be the same all over the U.S. It certainly can't be the same in another country.
yeah, I mean, I would offer the U.S. is it's a mature market in many ways, and that's okay. But we see it play out a couple of different ways. So for example, with all due respect, but you're seeing the two leading PSA companies have less and less outreach into the community you and I know. And Carl, I'm going to offer the S of SMB, just to kind of be clear about my point. And what I'm getting at is you could kind of argue that the people that want a PSA have a PSA in the USA. Yeah, that kind of works.
There you go.
And so the opportunity for those companies and others is going to be overseas. It's going to be India. It's going to be China, where it's highly unlikely they have a huge install base.
Right.
And hopefully that makes the point that the bigger deltas overseas, it's a good life. The whole expat lifestyle is a good life in those countries if that's what you want. If you want someone to cook and do your dishes and drive and yada yada yada, it's a good life. So I don't know, but let me ask you a question. I talked to you before your trip overseas. I've told you of my fondness for the Sunshine Coast, the Gold Coast,
right.
The Sunshine Coast up in Brisbane. When I lived in Australia, it was outside of Sydney in a country western town called Tamworth. But I still feel it won't be too many years before the last kid's out of the house, and I still feel I'd like to do a tour of duty up north on the Sunshine Coast. I think I would rent, having gone through a recession, Carl. I think I'd just rent a place for a couple of years.
Right.
I used to think I'd move and own, and now I'm kind of thinking, I think I'll rent, and then I can move along to other interesting places. But were you impacted that way on this trip? Did you have that moment like, I could run my business from Brisbane, Australia? Oh,
well, I mean, we were gone for 3 weeks, so, and Monica was with me, so everybody in the company was there, all the full-time employees, right? So we did run the company from there. And, the way that we are situated, our storage is, we have a map drive to a cloud to a rack space. Our exchange is hosted, and so those two are the same on any laptop anywhere in the world as long as you have internet connectivity. I did find that I think internet was slower and more expensive than I expected in Australia.
Yep.
In New Zealand, we were an hour and a half outside of Auckland, and we had amazing connectivity because, what do they do these days with a lighthouse, right, which is completely isolated? They put a cell tower on top of it. So, we had great connectivity. It just cost us a little bit more. But other than that, I could totally run my business from there. The main thing was getting back to the U.S. is just such a long experience. That's a hell of a flight.
Yeah, it is. Boy, howdy. But as I recall, if you want to grab that opportunity, you've got the flexibility. Is my understanding? Your daughter's in college. I mean, you potentially have the flexibility you need if that's what you want to do.
Right.
And so, and knowing our demographic who's listening to this webinar and podcast, a lot of us are moving into that stage. It's kind of like, oh, okay, what do I do now?
Well, the other thing is that I have two managed service clients that, were completely happy to have me be gone as long as they knew that I could remote in and take care of stuff and monthly maintenance got done and all that. And
Yeah.
in the business that I sold early this year, the America's Tech Support, we had a couple of different clients that had houses in other countries at least part of the year, and that's not an uncommon thing. I'm looking at the names of people who are attending this webinar. Several of them have told me that they've got clients who spend one or more months out of the year in another country. So it's not that unusual to have to figure out, like, what are we going to do with this, Mexican internet or, this French internet, whatever. It's something that we are already seeing people working with. And it's not really, there are no real obstacles anymore.
No, there's not. It's just, I think the U.S., the blue-collar Bobs have a challenge thinking globally. I mean, if I can be frank, is that in my interactions back home, I had a conversation with one individual where they recited, why would I ever go over there when they all want to come here? And I'm like, boy, don't give up your day job, Don't give up your day job, friend. Let's not talk about the Secretary of State opening in D.C.
So let me make this a little more personal to SMB Nation. So what are you guys doing, in the whatever months or years ahead to look at the global market and to are you bringing vendors in? Are you trying to get attendees from a more global market? You've always had a global market.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I built the company. Now, not surprising, the majority of the revenue is still from North America, and that shouldn't be a surprise. But right now I'm advising a couple of companies. So, I think I know I told you, but for the sake of giggles with the audience, if you looked at my LinkedIn profile, you'll see with SMB Nation turning 15, I've successfully, I've engaged in what I call succession planning, a la eMyth. And so Jenny and her team run the company day to day, and that's freed me to consult. So I guess if we count Canada is also one of my international opportunities, but I'm working with a couple of ISVs who are very quickly trying to lay down a footprint overseas. One of them's in the 365 area. Another is seeking some distribution relationships. And so I guess, well, and I just completed a global survey. A firm similar to like Forrester retained me to reach out for, Carl, you may recall, reach out for people who were in the Australia and Brazil area to go through a focus group. And so that's kind of what I'm doing right now is helping the ISV and not so much the OEM community, but I'm helping them very quickly try and get up to speed overseas with relationships and so on. And then inevitably we'll be back overseas this year with some tour activity. Just not sure when. I'm in some conversations with the people that financed the tour last year inside Microsoft, and hopefully that's shaping up for maybe what would be their Q4 starting in April. And quite frankly, then we'll probably be allowed to talk about Windows 10. So that would be the nature of that tour. But stay tuned. I mean, it's hard to, what's the old saying? It's hard to keep a good man down. So it's kind of hard to keep me grounded, right? I don't like my wings clipped.
No, not too much. So
that's kind of what's coming.
I don't know where your revenue divides, but I will tell you that we have a huge audience in Australia and New Zealand. I mean, it was clearly, overdue for me to go there, but it used to be U.S., U.K., Australia, but now we sell a lot of books in Europe and even Eastern Europe. I did managed services in a month. I came out with a Spanish edition for the first time, one of my books, hoping to break into the South American market. I sell more books in Russia than I do in all of Central and South America combined. So,
Yeah.
I have to break that language barrier in order to move into those markets.
Yeah. Now, are you doing it as an ebook? How are you handling? You got to remember, I wrote back in the day before ebooks. I mean, there were still things called newspapers.
Right.
In fact, we had a magazine. Now that I think about it.
Well,
how are you handling distribution? Are you just keeping it as an ebook?
Well, so the Spanish edition is available as print or electronic. I mean, you can get right off of Amazon. We even have a Kindle edition. So, any way that people want to get it, they can get it. So,
Hey, now stop it, Carl. There's women and children on this call. We'll have none of that talk, sir.
Or the book.
Okay.
So.
And by the way, some of that humor doesn't translate overseas. While we're on an international theme, I have to reel it back in a little bit. I'm sure you probably saw that, but slang
Oh yeah.
and humor doesn't compute. You say you want a nightcap in Australia, and they bring you a knit cap for your hat. So there's a little bit of that. But no, that's good that you've done that. We're not really focusing on that line of work for what we do. A couple of challenges with our focus, our niche right now in Office 365. The challenge with a book would be keeping it current, because they update the user interface and patches overnight, and so all of a sudden you have you just have a challenge if you try to write a book. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I applaud that you're doing more of the what I call evergreen topics.
Mm-hmm.
And so that seems to, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That I think you're having conversations that last more than 24 hours.
Right. Well, that's true. So, but even with the conference business and the seminar business, you've always had an international audience. And are you getting more people traveling these days, or are they staying with their regional events?
Well, we did this year. Now, part of that's a rising tide raises all ships. So the international community can afford to travel. We were short a couple of Australians, but I forgive them. Wayne Small had his wedding ceremony that he needed to focus on, and so we forgive Wayne. But yeah, Europe had a pretty strong showing. Canada, of course. So, Carl, it's a function of disposable income, as much as anything, because having our event in Redmond has curbside appeal. It's sort of like everybody needs to come to Mecca once in their life, and so that's been an asset for us. And I think you'll see that continue to grow. And then the other thing would be the content. By shifting over to 365, I in many ways feel the acceptance of 365 is higher overseas, the excitement. Do you remember meeting Ben, the speaker?
From the UK.
Numero uno, 365 guy.
Yeah, sold more licenses than anybody except CDW.
Yeah. I mean, there's your answer. There's your answer about, the innovation, the excitement, the success overseas. So it makes sense they would come to the conference. Again, we don't, I mean, I guess I'll pose it as a question, but do you see the same degree of resistance and Luddite attitudes in Australia about they took my SBS and they're forcing 365 down my throat that you see here in America, or was it more open and receptive to 365? I don't know.
Well,
You tell me.
so I was only exposed to people in the U.S., during the recession, right? During the time when all of that happened, SDS went away and so forth, the evolution of the cloud. But so I went to Australia a little late in the game in terms of attitudes. But the attitude that we found was that people were basically, they were over it. They were, focused on what's next, what do we sell now, and what am I going to make money on in 2015? So I thought that was a very good attitude.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and
I have a question about when you look at what a small MSP does. We've got, on one hand, we buy and sell services. So we want to sell our services in the U.S. Do we also want to sell them overseas? Does that make sense? And at the same time, should we be buying our services overseas, or should we stick to the U.S.? Because, there's a lot of movement to say, oh, buy locally. Well, buy locally means more than just not buying from the big guys in New York. It means not buying from the big guys in India or China. So how local do we need to be?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of thoughts. It's almost two different conversations. So buy locally, I live in a rural community of Bainbridge Island, and I make a point to go down to Main Street and, quite frankly, overpay for a couple of things here and there, because, I want to be a pillar of the community of which the community I live in, and want to set that example. So that's kind of on the left hand, and I think that's also applicable to maybe the average or typical MSP and, the last mile delivery of services. Now on the right hand, myself and then Carl, I swear, haven't had an email in December, but it certainly a month doesn't go by, if not every 2 weeks, I don't get a confidential email from some MSP in the U.S. saying, my business is changing, I'm gonna move on, I'm interested in selling, or I'm interested in merging, or I'm interested in this or that. And that's fine. That's okay. That's a legitimate conversation. Had the same conversation exactly this time of year with Beatrice in 97 or was it 98? No, 97. Remember, Beatrice was with us 5 or 6 years,
Right.
and then she moved on. And what she do today? I'll let you answer the question. What she do today? Well, she does hot yoga.
Right, she's doing yoga, and she's doing some training, but I think I think she even owns a studio.
Yeah, she has the hot yoga studio on the Space Coast of Florida. So moved on. So Carl, I don't know if you're having those confidential conversations. I am. For whatever reason, people reach out to me to maybe validate what they're going to do. So here's the international part, is that's fine that you put in, you put in your 10, you put in your 20, and you're retiring. So it's almost like, military service. But that opens up an opportunity overseas because, some of these contract houses, starting with the Accentures and the Avanads down through Capgemini, CompuCom, if you want to go be a contractor overseas in a non-military role, I'd recommend.
Yeah, these days, yeah.
It's not a lot of fun when they start shooting, let me tell you. But Carl, that's another way. So I'm pivoting your question a little bit. That it's not so much I see American MSPs exporting services that they do. It's more that they may migrate and say, you know what, I'm gonna go do a tour of duty overseas, and the paycheck's not bad, by the way. It's not a bad life.
Right. Especially if somebody else is paying, lodging and food.
Yeah. So that exists. I do struggle with the sort of the, you're almost kind of go back to Econ 101, and you're kind of setting up a leakages and injections conversation with international trade. And Carl, I don't have the answer. I'm in my office park, as you know, and I'm looking over at 2 MSPs well known in the community. their office is across the parking lot. And Carl, I don't know that they have a service they can export overseas.
Right.
That's stay tuned, to be determined.
Right. Well, yeah, that's an interesting question. Are we missing an opportunity? Is there a service we could be exporting, or something that we can do to help people in other countries take a step up without having to rely on local services that are not as sophisticated as what we can do?
Yeah, because if anything, I'm seeing just the opposite. I'm seeing Ashutosh, who you know from Pune, India, longtime conference attendee, and he has an American subsidiary for providing services, and basically they're arbitraging labor rates. I mean, it's a very simple business
Right.
model. They're just saying, we can do this work remotely, we can do this support remotely for cheaper, and that's what I'm saying. It's kind of the opposite, So Americans are going to have to provide higher value, which is why I'm glad my kid's studying engineering, so he can innovate robotics.
Well, if he gets into physics, the CERN laboratory and so forth, they're all in Europe. So we don't have any big ass particle accelerators in the United States.
Yeah, well, the national laboratories down in Los Alamos, I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at. But I think you're right. I don't know that they have the circle to accelerate particles. I don't think that's their niche. I think they make they develop peacekeepers.
Right, there you go.
I like to say.
So just in case anybody has any questions, if you want to put them in the question box or raise your hand, I'd be happy to take any questions anybody's got.
Sure.
So.
Well, Carl, one of the things, maybe while the questions are queuing, just, again, thoughts from a traveler, is I'm still, to this day, frustrated by some attitudes that when we have our conference in Redmond, just being totally blunt, but we have good customers on the East Coast that say, I have to fly, or that's too far. And I'm like, well, here's the good news. The planes don't have to refuel anymore from Boston. they can make it all the way. And it's that kind of attitude. I'm frustrated by that because I'm like, really? Come on. And then just compound that with the international travelers. I just don't see that with the foreign attendees, the people that come from India and
Right.
the UK and Australia. They just don't have this hang up that I have to get on a plane.
Right. Well, it's kind of interesting. So, I mean, on one hand, you look at vendors like Zinstra, right, that was very visible at your show.
Yeah, good guys out of the UK. Yeah.
When you look at them, you look at the original Zenith Infotech, and you say, okay, these guys are making a serious effort to put out time, effort, and money to come and educate us about their product. You have to respect the fact that they're willing to do that. And you say, okay, so what are we going to do, right? We're going to stay home and wait for them to come to us, or maybe it's time for us to do a little traveling as well.
Yeah. Oops, there we go. No, that's right. Carl, I don't know if you remember Kimberly West out of Atlanta, Georgia. She was involved in our community for a couple of years early on,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe she's moved on. And again, that's fine. But she tried to put together, boy, it's like at 11:59. I mean, it was right before the crash in '08. She tried to put together a, for lack of a better word, like a trade mission to Australia of SBSers. And it's a novel idea because it's a great way to get a vacation and deduct the expenses. That's kind of what trade missions are.
Right, exactly. Ask any congressman.
And, yeah, the idea was to go observe best practices. Hey, I should share. do you mind I should share? I totally forgot about a project I'm on, if you don't mind me
I
sharing
would
an
love to hear it.
international experience. Okay, so what we did, we have been retained by Microsoft Nordic Baltic, so that's one of the subs. And just as it sounds, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, through the Baltic region. So we've been retained for a program called Working Vacations. And so here's what we're doing. Just on a call yesterday, just got funded and kicking out the project plan as we speak. In May, Carl, you maybe you want to pop up here if the mood strikes you. But in May, 10 MSPs from the Nordic Baltic region will come over and shadow leading Puget Sound MSPs for about 8 days, 8 work days, and then there's going to be 2 learning days, a Microsoft tour day. We're hoping to get the handshake with Cindy Bates and
right.
that kind of thing, the grip and greet, and then a learning day. That's where I'll talk to you offline about all that, by the way. But so they're going to be here roughly May. I don't have it in front of me, but it's like May 8th through, what is that, the 23rd or 24th, and then that also positions them to stay on their own dime through Memorial Day, right? So they could say, wow, it's Friday, huge American holiday, I think I'll stay.
Nice.
And have a little fun and then go back to Europe. So we proposed that as part of our relationship with Microsoft VFI. So Microsoft has a political trade association called Voices for Innovation. They connected us with the Northern European sub. And Carl, it's one of those proposals. I mean, everyone on this call has had that. It's one of those where they're like, well, what do we do? Do we do an investor forum, like, bring people over to raise capital in the U.S. and that kind of thing? And I said, well, how about a student exchange program? I mean, that's basically what it is. It's a student exchange program, and then for adults. And then we get around the whole visa thing
right.
by calling it a working vacation. So there's no employment, there's no pay. But the idea is these 10 hand-selected MSPs from Nordic Baltic will be deposited here for 2 weeks, and we'll have the white van, Edna driving the white van, the whole motion, and they get to learn best practices and take them home, and then the idea will be to show success, right, and whatever that is, whatever metrics we agree on. We're pretty early in the project, and then do the reversal, right? So then take a Jameson West out here as an example. If Jameson participates, Jameson could then go for a 2-week out in Europe
right.
and get best practices. But I almost forgot that. But yeah, we just got that approved.
I can't wait to read about it in your magazine, although it sounds like you just scooped your own magazine.
Yeah. Well, it's all right. No, you should, sir. You should be the honor of that breaking news. We'll probably go public with it in January once we get a little bit closer on the details. But love, like I say, love to have you involved. It's Carl. The flights from Sacramento, they don't have to refuel to get up there.
Okay. Yeah, we fly the entire hour without refueling. That's awesome.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? It's great, man. But does that, I know we're going to hit top of the hour, but maybe that's a nice way to end in terms of my storytelling, is that there's your answer in terms of my international outreach, that we're doing a working vacation program. And dude, who knows?
Exactly.
I mean, we threw out I literally put together a 10-slide deck, threw it out, it got approved, and I'm like, I hope they're not on the line, but are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I got funded?
Now what do you do? Well, don't forget to take a road trip to Portland at some point, because the user group down there is super active, and I think they'd love to get involved.
Yeah, that'd be
so. And Steve's group up there is very involved. So I think it's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity for the people who get to interact with them, and it's a great opportunity for those who get to travel in both directions. So.
Yeah, and last comment, because I know you probably want to do a wrap and respect people's time, but kind of where I got the idea from was I was coaching a friend back home, grew up in Alaska, which feels like a foreign country, and I was coaching a friend back home, and she's an artist, and her parents have an oyster farm in Homer, Alaska, which is, a really idyllic part of the state. And the idea was, Carl, have you ever seen people about our age or older, present company accepted, but our generation, where they go on these like photo safaris, or they take a 2-week to go paint watercolors in the whole country of Texas, or the whole finding yourself movement, right? That you kind of made it in business, and you're in the last third of your life and you want to paint watercolors. Or I have to believe you have some of that crowd with your book publishers association. I'm sure you
oh
have
yeah
some of those people,
oh yeah
right? The old I always wanted to write a book crowd. That's where it came from. It was like, well, Alaskan art vacations, Alaskan art working vacations, or Alaskan art vacations. Well, let's just do working vacations, darn it, for MSPs. And sir, there you have it. I'm out of storytelling.
Okay. Well, let me ask you one final question, and that's, you may not be prepared for it, but is there one book that you would recommend that folks read to kind of get more of a global vision and start walking down the path towards thinking more globally?
Oh, man, that is a good question.
Sorry I didn't prep you for that.
Yeah, and I'm not in my home office. Carl, I'll email that. Maybe you can make that part of your follow-up.
Sure.
I'll tell you the book. I can't remember the title, but well, the World is Flat book. Why don't we call that number 2? The World is Flat by Friedman at the New York Times, where he starts out golfing in Bangalore. That's a must download.
Right.
and then the other one is this incredibly thick book about this very topic that Beatrice gave me in, must have been '05. I'm happy to report the spine on the back of the book has been broke. I actually opened the book, okay. Sir, I will get you that information, and you can either blog it or whatever, but there is a book.
Okay.
And I did thumb through it. I haven't read it, of course, but it more importantly, Carl, it just got me thinking. Sometimes the book's role is to just be a catalyst,
right,
or a doorstop and a catalyst.
not your books or my books, of course, but other people's books.
There you go. Well, hey, thanks for having me on, man. This is a real treat. Now, is this recorded, by the way?
Yeah, this will be recorded, and we'll have it posted up for people to download. And I really thank you. I thank you for everything you've done for this community, and I thank you for being our kickoff guest for the webinar series. And next month, we're going to have Robert Crane from Australia, who was a great host for us when we were down there, and he runs a couple of different groups down there, and he's just super active, and he's one of these people that he's not afraid to get on an airplane and spend some money, come to the United States. And when you do that and you spend 22, 24 hours flying and in airports, you want to make it worth your while. And so we're going to talk to him about how you get the most out of that true international travel, and why he chooses to come here and go to other countries as well. So Robert Crane will be with us, and that's, again, we're going to do this on the last Tuesday of each month. So just put it on your calendar. If you signed up online, you should get notifications for all of them. So having said that, I thank you, Harry, for being with us today, and I thank everybody who called in.